Welcome the Lord's chosen. Pain doesn't just hurt people, it edits them. Most people think pain is an event, something that happens, makes noise, causes damage, and then leaves. That's comforting. It suggests there's a before and after version of life where everything eventually returns to normal. But real pain doesn't work like that. The kind of pain that breaks families, patterns, and entire bloodlines doesn't announce itself loudly. It stays. It studies you. It waits to see what parts of you are weak enough to remove. Here's a quiet fact that rarely gets talked about. Prolonged psychological stress doesn't just affect memory or mood. It physically reshapes the brain. Regions responsible for threat detection grow stronger, while areas linked to trust and ease shrink. In other words, pain doesn't just give you experience. It upgrades your alert system and deletes your trial version of innocence. That's not trauma poetry, that's biology. So, when people say you changed, they're half right. You didn't change the way someone changes clothes. You adapted the way a species does when the environment becomes hostile. You learned faster, noticed more, and laughed less at things that used to be funny. And yes, sometimes that makes you look intense, quiet, or like you've mentally aged several decades overnight. Congratulations. That's what happens when life forces you into an advanced level without asking if you finish the tutorial. There's a strange irony in it all. The very experiences that could have erased you are the ones that made you unrecognizable. Not louder, not tougher in a movie hero way, just sharper, more precise, less impressed. You didn't become dramatic, you became efficient. This isn't a story about surviving pain and coming out stronger in a motivational poster sense. It's about what you actually turn into when you carry weight that was never meant to be passed down and still refuse to let it rot you from the inside. Number 1, you became a psychological outlier, not a survivor. Survivors are expected to return, to rejoin the world, blend back in, and function the way they did before everything went wrong. That idea sounds kind, but it's dishonest. What you went through didn't pause your life, it rewrote it. You didn't cross a finish line and get handed a medal. You crossed a threshold and never fully came back. That's not weakness, that's transformation. A survivor keeps the original shape and learns how to cope around the damage. You didn't have that luxury. You had to reconfigure yourself from the inside out. The way you think, decide, trust, and move through situations changed because the old operating system would have failed under that kind of pressure. Now you process information faster, spot inconsistencies earlier, and feel uneasy in places others find comfortable. Not because you're broken, but because you're calibrated differently. This is why you often feel out of sync with people. Conversations stay on the surface too long. Problems feel artificially small. People panic over things you already learned to live with. It can make you seem detached, serious, or distant, when in reality, your tolerance for noise dropped and your demand for substance went up. You're not unimpressed by life. You're uninterested in pretending. Being a psychological outlier also means you don't respond to incentives the same way. Praise doesn't move you much. Fear tactics barely work. You've already seen what happens when things fall apart, so the usual pressure buttons don't hit like they're supposed to. That makes some people uncomfortable. They can't predict you, motivate you, or scare you into compliance, and they often mislabel that as arrogance or coldness. But the truth is simpler. You're not here to prove resilience. You're here because you adapted when adaptation was the only option. You don't wear survival as an identity because you're not trying to be inspirational. You just learned how to exist in conditions that would have collapsed entire family patterns, and you came out operating on a level most people never have to reach. That's not survival. That's becoming something else entirely. Number 2, your nervous system rewired itself for threat, not comfort. When most people talk about trauma or pain, they frame it like an emotional wound that will heal over time. That's convenient, but it's far from the truth. The kind of pain you endure doesn't just linger in memory. It rewires the very circuitry of your body. Your nervous system isn't designed to forgive easily. It's designed to survive. And yours took notes, learned lessons, and now reacts in ways most people will never understand. You don't relax the way other people do. Even when your surroundings look safe, a small part of your mind is scanning for danger, looking for the hidden edge that could strike at any moment. That's not paranoia. It's a survival upgrade that your body forced on you because the old system would have gotten you hurt again. What others call overthinking is just your nervous system's way of keeping you one step ahead of a world that once tried to break you. Every twitch of anxiety, every pulse of tension is a warning system, finely tuned and unwilling to turn off. The funny part is that people mistake this for weakness. They see tension and assume fragility. They see vigilance and call it obsession. They don't realize that your body remembers in ways your mind can't fully explain. Muscles stay ready. Senses stay sharp. Sleep never truly feels safe because your body refuses to forget the lessons of chaos. Comfort became a foreign concept because comfort is optional and danger is persistent. And yet, there's power in it. This rewiring doesn't just protect you. It gives you insight that others can't access. You notice threats before they surface. You detect deception in tones, gestures, and pauses. You move through situations with an unconscious awareness that feels almost instinctual. That's not a flaw or a curse. It's a product of endurance. You weren't made to blend in or rest easy. You were made to navigate a world that underestimated the cost of ignoring the ones who endured what they couldn't survive. You don't just live with the past. You live because your body adapted to it, becoming sharper, faster, and harder to catch off guard than anyone around you. The nervous system didn't break. You just evolved under fire. Number 3, you lost the ability to be naive, and that was the real cost. Naivety is often romanticized as innocence, like a badge of purity you get to wear until the world teaches you otherwise. But the truth is, losing naivety isn't a lesson you sign up for. It's a debt you inherit from pain that was never meant for you. When you went through what you went through, your mind stopped trusting that people would act in predictable, safe ways. You learned too early, too deeply, that appearances are deceptive and comfort is often a trap. That's not just growing up. That's surviving a system designed to exploit hesitation and ignorance. Once naivety disappears, life stops being a series of surprises and starts being a series of calculations. You can't go into situations blindly anymore. Every smile, every compliment, every offer comes with a shadow of skepticism because you've seen how easily trust can be weaponized. You see patterns other people overlook, understand motives they ignore, and notice the consequences before they happen. That level of awareness isn't chosen. It's enforced by experience, and it doesn't come with a pause button. There's a side effect to this that most people miss. Losing naivety doesn't just change how you see others. It changes how you see yourself. You become conscious of your own vulnerabilities in a way that never existed before. Every decision carries weight. Every action is measured because you know the cost of error. That doesn't make you cynical. It makes you precise. You aren't impressed by easy wins or comforting lies because you've already paid the price for ignoring truth once. And yet there's a strange freedom in it. Once innocence is gone, you stop being easily manipulated. You navigate life with sharper instincts and clearer boundaries. You laugh less at foolishness, but you also waste less energy on it. You are no longer naive, yes, but you are also unbreakable in ways people rarely recognize. The real cost was steep, but the transformation it forced is unparalleled. You didn't just endure. You evolved into someone who can see the world as it is, unfiltered, and still keep moving forward. Number 4, you develop discipline without choosing it. Most people think discipline is something you cultivate slowly, like a habit you pick up from books, routines, or motivational speeches. That's cute, but it doesn't compare to the kind of discipline that grows in the soil of unavoidable pain. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to be consistent. You were forced to. Every day demanded a level of attention, endurance, and action that ordinary people could shrug off or postpone. You didn't have the luxury of procrastination or excuses. Discipline became less of a choice and more of a survival mechanism. This is why the kind of discipline you carry feels different. It isn't about hitting the gym, meditating, or following trends. It's deeper. It's a quiet, relentless engine that moves whether you're motivated or not. Your mind learned that hesitation costs too much. Delay equals danger. Every step you take is calculated, precise, and often invisible to anyone else. That's the kind of consistency forged under pressure, habit transformed into instinct. You also learned that discipline isn't always neat. It doesn't come with applause. It's messy, exhausting, and sometimes lonely. There were moments when you wanted to give up, when the weight felt unbearable, but you didn't. Because giving up wasn't an option, and failure wasn't just personal. It carried consequences that echoed beyond you. That's what separates this from ordinary perseverance. It's not self-improvement. It's survival refined into action. And here's the irony. People admire discipline when it's flashy, public, or easy to track. But your discipline is invisible until it meets a challenge no one else can handle. It's in the quiet decisions, the repeated actions that seem mundane to outsiders, and the refusal to break under pressure. You don't talk about it, and that makes it even more potent. You didn't become disciplined because you wanted to be admired. You became disciplined because pain required it. The world thinks of discipline as effort. You learned it as necessity. And that makes it not just unshakable, but almost untouchable. It's the kind of strength that others can see only when it's too late to stop you. Number 5, you stopped expecting rescue and started engineering exits. There's a moment in certain kinds of suffering when you realize no one is coming. Not the people you counted on, not the systems that promised protection, not the fate that was supposed to intervene. Most people cling to hope, waiting for someone to step in and fix what's broken. You didn't have that luxury. Pain like yours doesn't wait politely for help. It forces you to act, to adapt, and to create solutions before the next blow lands. That's when you stopped hoping for rescue and started building exits. These exits aren't just physical, they're mental, emotional, and strategic. You learned to anticipate danger, calculate risk, and construct paths that ensure you remain standing even when everything around you collapses. You no longer rely on others to guide you through chaos, because you've seen firsthand how unreliable human hands can be. Instead, you map your own escape, design your own safeguards, and trust your own judgment above all else. That's not arrogance, it's the direct result of experience. This shift changes how you interact with the world. You become deliberate in your relationships, cautious in your commitments, and precise in your movements. You notice opportunities and threats before they fully manifest. You plan not just for what you want, but for what could go wrong. Comfort and convenience are luxuries you no longer count on because they can vanish in a moment. Instead, you focus on control where it matters. Your choices, your environment, and your trajectory. There's a paradox in this evolution. The more self-reliant you become, the more freedom you achieve. Waiting for rescue is a passive state that ties you to others' agendas. Engineering exits, on the other hand, gives you mobility, autonomy, and foresight. You operate in a world that constantly surprises the unprepared, yet you move like a shadow with an invisible map. In the end, what you turned into isn't someone hardened by cynicism. It's someone who understands the rules of survival at a level few ever reach. You stopped expecting rescue because you became your own safest place. You became someone who doesn't just endure, but designs ways to stay unbroken no matter what comes next. Number 6, you learn to compartmentalize emotions like tools. When you've been through what would break entire families, experiencing emotions becomes a matter of survival. Feeling everything all at once isn't just exhausting, it's dangerous. You quickly realized that allowing grief, rage, or fear to run unchecked doesn't help you. It can destroy you. So you learned to compartmentalize. Each feeling became a tool, something to be used at the right time, in the right measure, rather than a weight that dragged you under. You didn't choose this out of convenience. Life demanded it. This kind of emotional compartmentalization changes the way you operate in the world. You don't react impulsively like others might. When betrayal, loss, or pressure strikes, your response isn't chaos, it's calculated. You can feel anger without letting it consume you, sadness without letting it weaken you, and even joy without becoming reckless. Emotions are no longer a flood, but a set of instruments you can pick up, use, and set down as needed. That makes you seem detached to the untrained eye, but in truth, you're the opposite. Deeply aware, deeply alive, just deliberately controlled. There's also a protective element. By compartmentalizing, you create mental boundaries that preserve your stability. You can face chaos and danger without being overwhelmed, because each emotion has a place and a purpose. You don't let external events dictate your inner state. You decide when and how each feeling is relevant. That's the difference between surviving and thriving. While others flail under pressure, you maintain focus and clarity. The ironic power of this skill is how invisible it is. Most people assume emotional mastery is about being soft, expressive, or openly resilient. Yours is quiet, almost imperceptible, and far more effective. It allows you to navigate life with precision, to act strategically, and to endure situations that would crush anyone untrained. You didn't just survive the emotional storm, you transformed it into a toolkit. You became someone who can feel deeply, act decisively, and never let what should hurt define your capacity to move forward. Number 7, you became hard to impress because you've seen the worst. Most people are impressed by gestures, words, or appearances. A flashy accomplishment, a clever lie, or a dramatic display can move them because they've never been forced to measure life in terms of survival. You, on the other hand, have seen what most people run from, what they pretend doesn't exist, and what would break anyone who isn't prepared. That kind of exposure rewires how you respond to the world. Ordinary thrills, applause, or superficial charm barely register anymore. You've learned that appearances lie, and that people rarely match the persona they present. This makes you selective, almost surgical, in what you allow to influence you. You don't hand out trust, admiration, or respect lightly because you've seen how easily those gifts can be weaponized. You notice effort behind intention, truth behind words, and patterns behind performance. A smile without consistency, a promise without accountability. It barely moves you. The lessons you've absorbed make you demand authenticity, even if authenticity is rare, uncomfortable, or inconvenient. Being hard to impress isn't just about skepticism, it's about survival. Ordinary distractions, trivial drama, and shallow competition are irrelevant to someone who has already witnessed what real pain and failure look like. You don't waste energy reacting to noise because you've already endured storms that dwarf everyday inconveniences. That makes your presence deceptive to others. You appear calm, distant, or indifferent, but internally you're always evaluating, always measuring, always aware. There's a strange power in this state. People try to influence you, test you, or manipulate you, and it fails because their usual tactics no longer work. Your past pain and exposure act as filters that block the superficial and highlight the meaningful. You've developed a radar that recognizes depth, danger, and honesty without effort. That ability makes you unshakable, but it also makes connection rare and deliberate. You aren't unimpressed because you're cold. You're precise, aware, and unafraid of the truths others avoid. The world can try to dazzle you, but you've already seen the gravity behind the curtain, and nothing ordinary tips the scale anymore. Number 8. You developed an internal authority that doesn't ask permission. When the world tried to break you, it didn't just test your limits. It forced you to build a command center inside yourself. Ordinary people look for validation, guidance, or permission from external sources because they've never faced situations that demanded immediate, uncompromising judgment. You didn't have that luxury. The pain and chaos you endured required you to make decisions that mattered, fast, and often with no one to back you up. Over time, you stopped asking anyone for approval. You became your own authority, the one whose judgment matters most. This internal authority changes how you navigate life. You don't hesitate or look sideways for reassurance because experience has already trained your instincts. You've seen how unreliable external voices can be, how advice, warnings, or support often come too late or worse, in ways that exacerbate harm. So you learn to trust your own mind above all else. You assess, decide, and act without waiting for consent, because waiting could mean falling behind, or worse, being destroyed. The power of this self-reliance is subtle but profound. It's not about arrogance or control over others. It's about control over yourself. Your focus, your standards, and your boundaries are dictated by your inner authority, not by the whims or opinions of anyone else. People notice it, and some fear it, because it can't be negotiated or swayed easily. You've internalized judgment to the point where it operates quietly but decisively, guiding your actions in ways that external pressure never could. There's freedom in this authority too. Once you stop asking permission, you're no longer tied to the approval of anyone who might misunderstand, mislead, or disappoint you. Your choices are yours alone, and that clarity creates a rare kind of power. Pain taught you that no one can protect you better than yourself, and over time, that lesson crystallized into a force that doesn't just endure, it governs. You don't follow rules that don't serve you. You don't wait for validation. You act, and that makes you not just resilient, but sovereign in your own life. Number 9, you carry empathy with boundaries, not softness. Most people confuse empathy with weakness. They think if you feel for others, you must also absorb their pain, carry their burdens, and risk losing yourself in the process. You learned quickly that kind of empathy can be lethal. The pain you endured showed you that feeling deeply doesn't have to mean surrendering control. Instead, you developed a form of empathy that comes with armor, a version that allows you to understand suffering without letting it destroy your center. You feel, but you do not collapse. You care, but you do not become hostage to another's chaos. This boundary-driven empathy shapes every interaction. You can read people with remarkable precision. You sense fear, deception, and grief before words are spoken. Yet you maintain a mental distance that keeps your judgment clear. You can support someone, offer guidance, or stand with them in darkness without losing yourself to their despair. That doesn't make you cold or unfeeling. It makes you deliberate. You have chosen the terms under which your heart engages, and that choice is rare, almost surgical in its effectiveness. There's a quiet power in this kind of empathy. While others get consumed by emotions they cannot regulate, you navigate the human experience with a map few possess. You know when to act, when to hold back, and when to step away, and that ability protects both you and those around you. You don't spread yourself thin trying to fix everything. You offer presence, insight, and understanding, but only within limits that keep you intact. The irony is striking. People mistake your discipline for distance, your precision for coldness. They do not realize that carrying empathy with boundaries is far more difficult than abandoning it altogether. It requires awareness, restraint, and a deep understanding of human fragility. You didn't become detached because you lost care. You became intentional because you survived knowing what happens when care is untempered. You feel everything that matters but on your own terms, and that makes your empathy not just sustainable, but almost untouchably powerful. Number 10, you became selective with closeness, not antisocial. Experiencing pain at the level you did changes the way you view connection. You don't avoid people because you dislike them. You avoid exposure because you've learned how dangerous trust can be when placed in the wrong hands. Closeness is no longer casual. It's a calculated decision. Every friendship, relationship, or alliance is measured for safety, reliability, and alignment. You don't seek numbers or surface-level affection. You seek depth and security. That's why people sometimes mistake your selectivity for detachment or indifference. They don't realize it's not avoidance, it's protection. This selectivity transforms how you interact with the world. You don't waste time on people whose presence doesn't enhance or stabilize your life. You don't expend energy trying to impress or please. Every emotional investment carries potential consequences, and you've learned that overextending leaves you vulnerable. So you keep your circle intentionally small, your conversations intentional, and your commitments measured. This isn't a limitation, it's precision. You conserve energy for the people and situations that truly matter, and that focus makes you rare. Being selective also strengthens your inner world. You develop loyalty, empathy, and attentiveness toward those who meet your standards because you can afford to be fully present only when the environment is safe. You don't scatter your energy across trivial connections or fleeting relationships. You engage deeply, but with discretion. That's a skill most people never master because they haven't been forced to face the consequences of misplaced trust or unguarded closeness. There's power in this restraint. You move through social and emotional landscapes with intentionality, and people notice, even if they don't understand. You are approachable, but not exploitable. You are open, but not naive. You are capable of connection, but only where it counts. Your selectivity is not a barrier, it's a filter, ensuring that every bond you form is meaningful, every alliance sustainable, and every closeness survivable. In a world full of superficial ties that makes you uncommonly safe, uncommonly wise, and uncommonly untouchable. Number 11, you outgrew environments before they noticed you changed. The pain you carried didn't just affect you internally, it changed the way you existed in the world. The people, places, and systems around you often stayed the same, rigid in their expectations, unaware that you had evolved. While they continued on familiar paths, you had already moved into uncharted territory mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. That shift isn't always visible to outsiders. To them, you might still be the same person they knew yesterday, but internally, the rules you once followed no longer applied. You had outgrown the environment before it realized you were no longer operating by its standards. This creates a quiet tension. The world expects you to conform, to meet it where it is, to follow patterns that no longer serve you, but you don't. Your awareness, resilience, and understanding have advanced beyond the comfort zones of those around you. Ordinary conversations feel shallow, predictable routines feel confining, and familiar social dynamics feel almost absurd because your mind and instincts have already adapted to higher stakes. You are operating on a plane that others rarely see until they are forced to by circumstance. Outgrowing environments also demands a kind of independence that isn't always acknowledged. You stop waiting for recognition, permission, or validation from the systems or people around you. You know the distance between your evolution and their perception of you is wide, and you accept it without bitterness. That acceptance is quiet power. It allows you to move, to act, and to create in spaces where most would feel trapped, misunderstood, or constrained. There's a strange liberation in this. Being ahead of your environment forces you to rely on your own judgment, intuition, and resilience. It separates you from distractions, from toxicity, and from the inertia of those who have not yet been tested in the ways you have. You didn't just survive. You advanced, evolved, and transcended expectations before anyone else even realized the game had changed. You became a presence that the old environment can no longer contain, whether it knows it or not. Number 12, you learned that strength doesn't feel powerful. Most people associate strength with spectacle, loud confidence, visible victories, and dramatic displays. That's not the kind of strength you developed. The strength forged from the pain you endured is quiet, heavy, and almost invisible to the untrained eye. It doesn't feel like power because it isn't about impressing anyone. It's about enduring, moving forward, and staying intact when the world is actively trying to break you. It sits in your bones and your mind like a low hum, steady, unshakable, and constant. This type of strength is often misunderstood. To outsiders, it can look like detachment, stoicism, or even indifference. But inside, it's a disciplined tension that keeps you upright when every instinct screams to collapse. It doesn't need validation because it's proven itself over and over again, not through applause or recognition, but through survival. You don't flex it or announce it, it simply exists, reliable and uncompromising. The paradox of this strength is that it often feels lonely. People are drawn to the dramatic, to visible victories, to displays of might, and they rarely recognize the quiet endurance of someone who has already faced destruction and kept moving. You've learned that true strength is often invisible, and that's what makes it dangerous to those who underestimate it. It doesn't announce itself with noise or ego. It shows up in your ability to make decisions calmly under pressure, to act when others panic, and to continue even when nothing seems to support you. There's a subtle freedom in this realization. When you stop measuring strength by what others can see, you stop needing approval. You stop competing for attention and focus instead on mastery over yourself. Every challenge, every hardship, every moment of intense pressure reinforces that this strength is yours alone. It doesn't boast, it doesn't demand recognition, and it doesn't tire. You carry it quietly, invisibly, but it is unshakable. That's what separates you from anyone who has only survived because you didn't just survive. You became fundamentally, quietly powerful in a way the world can't take away. Number 13, you stopped believing life is fair and started believing it's navigable. Most people live under the illusion that life has rules, that effort equals reward, or that fairness is somehow guaranteed. You can't afford that luxury anymore. The kind of pain you endured showed you early on that life is messy, unpredictable, and often indifferent to justice. Waiting for balance, hoping for fairness, or expecting the world to hand you what's owed became useless exercises. The only thing you could rely on was yourself and your ability to navigate the chaos. That realization changed everything. Once you stopped expecting fairness, you started seeing the world differently. You began to measure life not by what should happen, but by what can be influenced. Every challenge became a problem to solve, every obstacle a situation to maneuver through, and every interaction a negotiation of energy and intent. You stopped wasting time on hope for justice and started focusing on leverage, timing, and positioning, the tools that actually produce results. Survival wasn't about morality, it was about strategy. This perspective also sharpens decision-making. You no longer get distracted by what's right in theory or what ought to be. You measure impact, probability, and consequences. You recognize that people, institutions, and circumstances act according to self-interest, fear, and chaos, not fairness. Accepting this truth frees you from frustration and allows you to act with clarity, confidence, and precision. There's a certain power in this shift. While others wait, complain, or feel victimized, you move, you adapt, you plan, you anticipate outcomes that would blindside most people, and position yourself in ways that maximize advantage and minimize exposure. Life doesn't owe you anything, but you've learned how to steer through it anyway. In the end, what this teaches is subtle but profound. Believing in fairness is a luxury. Believing in navigation is survival. You didn't just endure what could have destroyed you. You learned the rules that actually matter, the ones no one teaches, and the ones that turn chaos into opportunity. You became someone who doesn't wait for life to be fair. You make life work anyway. Number 14, you turned into someone who can endure without becoming cruel. There's a cruel truth about suffering. Most people who endure extreme pain either break or mirror it back at the world. Anger, bitterness, and resentment become easy companions because they feel like armor. You didn't take that path. You absorbed more than most could handle, but instead of letting it harden you into someone bitter, you learned to carry it with discipline, restraint, and precision. Endurance became your identity, but it didn't corrupt your ability to act with integrity or empathy. That is the rarest transformation of all. This capacity doesn't come from virtue or moral teaching. It comes from necessity and choice. You saw what cruelty does firsthand, how it fractures trust, destroys futures, and leaves permanent marks on everyone it touches. You also saw what survival requires: clarity, patience, and the ability to navigate hardship without letting it dictate your moral compass. Enduring without cruelty means carrying weight without offloading it onto others, reacting without lashing, and moving forward without becoming a reflection of the pain you've absorbed. That is not natural. It is consciously honed. People often mistake your restraint for weakness. They assume that if you haven't lashed out, if you don't retaliate, or if you don't wield your pain as a weapon, you are fragile or naive. They don't understand that holding back takes far more strength than giving in. To maintain composure when the world has tried to break you, to continue making precise, intentional choices despite the scars, requires a level of mastery that most never achieve. The power in this transformation is quiet but profound. You've endured horrors that would crush most people, yet you didn't let them shape your character into something unrecognizable. Instead, you refined yourself, becoming someone unshakable yet humane, someone who moves through life with authority but without malice, someone whose survival carries a depth and subtlety few can comprehend. You became a paradox, strong enough to survive anything, and yet disciplined enough to remain fundamentally unbroken in spirit. That is the culmination of all your suffering: strength tempered by restraint, endurance without cruelty. Pain, when it reaches the level you've experienced, doesn't just leave marks. It transforms everything about who you are. It rewires your mind, sharpens your instincts, and forces you to operate on levels most people will never encounter. You didn't simply survive, you evolved. You became a psychological outlier, someone whose nervous system, intuition, and emotional intelligence were forged under pressure. You learned discipline, self-reliance, and strategic thinking in ways that were never optional. You carry empathy without weakness, discern truth from illusion, and navigate life with clarity that comes from seeing both its chaos and its possibilities. You stopped expecting fairness or rescue because you realized that survival belongs to those who act, not those who hope. You became someone who endures without bitterness, who sees deeply without being overwhelmed, and who commands their life without asking permission. Every point, every lesson, every change isn't just a coping mechanism. It's a testament to the rare and extraordinary transformation that pain can create. What you became is not just stronger, sharper, or more aware. It's someone fundamentally unbreakable, someone who can move through the world with precision, power, and integrity. These are the traits that separate the ordinary from the exceptional, the superficial from the enduring. The experiences that could have destroyed entire bloodlines instead shaped you into someone who navigates life with unmatched awareness, intentionality, and subtle force. That is the culmination of everything discussed, the quiet, relentless, and transformative power of enduring what most cannot. If this perspective resonated with you, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that challenge, awaken, and transform. Hit the like button if this gave you a new way of seeing strength. Leave a comment to share your thoughts or experiences, and share this with someone who needs to understand the power of endurance and transformation. Every action you take here helps keep this conversation alive, because what you've learned and what you've become deserves to be witnessed. Stay blessed always.